In this video, we are going to be talking about rounding. We are going to seek to answer the question, how do we round to the nearest hundred? In the previous video, we talked about how to round to the nearest 10. We also talked about how rounding is important because it makes numbers easier to understand and work with. Rounding becomes more useful as we continue to learn how to round to higher place values, like here as we're learning to round to the hundredth value. When we're rounding to the nearest hundred, we're looking for what hundred the number is closest to. So these are some the hundreds that we have to choose from. So as you see here, the units and tens columns are always going to be a 0 when you're rounding to the nearest hundred, as you see here. The important thing to note is that any numbers that are to the left of the hundredths column do not determine, we don't have to worry about them as we're rounding to the hundred. So all of these numbers here are going to round to the same last three numbers. As we're rounding to the nearest hundred, we want to look at the tens column. We always, when we're rounding, we want to look to the column that is right of the number that we're rounding to. So just like when we had the tens, we were looking at the units to determine the tens place, the nearest 10. And now for the nearest hundred, we're looking to the tens place. So for our options here, it's either 500 or 600 as the nearest hundred. So when we're looking at the tens, the same thing applies as when we were rounding to the tens. 0 to 4, it stays the same. So if the 10 number is 4 or less, the 100 stays the same. If the 10 value is 5 or higher to 9, you round up the 100th place. So we still have the same saying applies. 4 or less, just ignore. 5 or higher, add one more. So now when we're looking at that number line, we see how 510, 520, 530, 540 are closer to 500 than they are to 600. And the same here, these ones are closer to 600 than they are 500. And then the middle value, 550, is we round up, as we talked about before. So now let's try this on our own. The first number we have is 509. Think in your head or write on a piece of paper what would be the nearest hundred that this number would round to. Did you write 500? Then you are correct. Because when we look at the tens value, we see that this is a 0, which means that the hundredth value stays the same, and then the rest are zeros after it. So we get the answer of 500. Let's try this next problem of 438. Round it to the nearest hundred. Did you write 400? Then you are correct. Because we have the tens column, we have a 3. That is 4 or lower, so the 100 stays the same, and we change the rest to zeros, giving us 400. Now we have the number 86,782. Round to the nearest hundred. Remember that the numbers before it do not matter in when we're determining it. Did you get 86,800? Then you are correct. Good job. We see here that the tens column is an 8. So that is higher than 5. So then we add 1 to the hundredth column and we get here 800, as 800 is the nearest hundred in this number. The last problem is a tricky one, but I want you to try it on your own and see what the answer you get. So round this number, 3,990, to the nearest hundred. If you got 4,000, you are correct. This is a little tricky because we look at the tens column, we see that it's a 9, so we know that we're rounding up. We are adding 1 to the 100th column, but when we add 1 to 9, we get 10, and that would be hard to, you couldn't just write a 10 here. You would have to add the 1 to the 3 to make it 4,000 and then turn the rest into zeros. So this is an example of what happens when both numbers are a 9 and you have to add 1 to the next place value over to the left. This video explained how to round to the nearest hundred. Thank you for watching.